Production of meetings and events. You can see all the work just based on this picture of what goes into it, the unfinished floor and putting everything together. It's a lot, and kind of reverting back to some other chapters we talked about, why you kind of use the same people a lot of times over and over again. Because why? Because they know what they're doing, and logistically a lot of the stuff is a pain. You can see this looks like a 2-story event that they're erecting on the right, even if that's a facade on the second floor. Like, that's a lot of work to put that in every time. And some of these larger convention centers, we're talking about events that happen probably almost every day during the year. Pretty close to it. And the facility hopes every day, obviously. On-site managing, like we talked about. You want to outsource this stuff or not. Housing reports, function room layouts, how do you want this? And for every type of layout in a room, there's pluses and minuses and reasons for doing it one way and reasons for doing it another way. Effect, movement, like all kinds of different things in it. So it just depends on what is the goal of that space at that time. Interaction, lecture, movement, we don't know. It depends on what happens. It's obviously different for every event. Weddings are pretty straightforward. I say that tongue firmly planted in cheek. Issues faced on site, things that can't be moved. Access to, and maybe you need so much power because you want to have a stage and have all this stuff, and everyone says you have a great location for it, but if you turn all these things on at the same time, there's not going to be any power because it's going to knock the circuits out. That's not a good idea. Access, floors, can we move the floors? Like, I can tell you the famous wedding thing is the dance floor. And we'd like to have it over here, and we'd like to move it, and it's not as easy as it sounds to put a parquet dance floor together in a part, and it's usually pretty heavy too. Needs and contracts. When we talked about in chapter 13 about keynote speakers, they may have things that go above and beyond the event that they require. So you have to look at all these different things. This person's going to perform, and they have these special requirements that go above and beyond the event itself. Happens quite a bit. Talked about AV before, production technical directors, and you have a technical director? For a lot of events we do. The bigger that they get, and again, when we tie in, guest speakers and special attraction speakers and stuff like this, that this happens. The ancillary events, good, but not so good that they overshadow the main event, right? Age, gender appropriateness of the group. And it's kind of silly to say, but yeah, you don't want to have activities designed for 20-year-olds when your average age of your attendees is 50. Sometimes you can let them plan their own activities. This free time is here, and here's a bunch of things that happen in this area you might be interested in. Talked about these initiatives and how you can what you want to do is make sure that everyone understands, right? And when you look at that, who has signing authority, things that are coming in to set up for the event, things that may require some approval, you need to know who to go to. When these things are setting up, there's a lot of activity, a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces. If we have someone standing there that has no authority to say yes, no, or you should do this, we need to be able to get in touch with a person who can say that. And communicate to where you say, listen, if someone shows up to you and says, hey, we have a question about HVAC, we have a question about lighting, we have a question about power. Oh yeah, hold on one second. Whether that is walkie-talkies or phones or whatever, how do we get in touch with that person? The on-site teams, again, budgeted, trained, temporary staff, a lot of temporary staff in events. And as I mentioned before in some other chapters, a lot of volunteers. Make sure that they are trained properly. It's a lot of stuff going on at once. They are there to help, and we appreciate and welcome and love their help, but we want to make sure that it is that we're making it worth their time also. Because volunteering, you're like, oh, God, I have to be here. What's the incentive? And I think there's nothing worse in an event than we have temporary staff or volunteers who are standing around who haven't been told what they're supposed to do. And I should not be getting upset as someone who's in charge, because guess whose fault that is? It's my fault that I didn't clearly define what my expectations were for this event and what I needed them to be doing at a certain time. You need to lay that out as much as you possibly can. On-site communications, again, depends. It's situational, right? So, but it needs to be there. I talked about that already. Behavioral communication to me is big. Just because you're volunteering doesn't mean I don't have a certain level of expectation for how you should behave before, during, and after an event, and that's key. These larger things, and I've done large things that are weddings or museum openings or things like that, where I've had volunteers come in, and I'm very clear with them what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and when you look at all these things, hey, if there's a situation, I want to introduce you to Sarah. Sarah's the person you need to go to, right? And clarification, reviewing, communication. Is there going to be criticism? There's going to be criticism. I can tell you, as many events as I've done, a lot of them have had questions. I don't want to say that, critical. It makes it sound like that we were terrible at what we did. But as I said, I'm going to take the example of a wedding. Friend of a friend of a friend of the groom comes up and wants to let you know something they're displeased with. Talked about this before. They're not paying, but they're still a guest, and they're still an event attendee. And so I need to take that and listen to that seriously. Whatever it may be, even if it is outlandish, even if it's something that we cannot do, it is how things happen, or things that happen in the heat of the moment, or people that come in 5 minutes before the event and go, no, we said this. This is not what we wanted. You can always work with these things. The message in your head is how you convey that message to your staff, to the attendees, to everybody else. Communication, equipment, resources, technology appropriate. Again, what is the event? What is the appropriate technology that needs to be used? If it's something that really isn't relevant to this event, and you have someone, again, this critical response of, why can't I do this and why can't I do this? And it's like, well, this event is for this, and what you're asking for kind of falls outside what we talked about when we set up the contract for this event. So we're going to do our best to help you out, but that's not what this is supposed to be. Whatever that is. But when you have a certain event, you've done events for a long time, you start to figure out, well, oh, this is this, well, I know we're going to need A, B, and C. For sure. Like, before we even start meeting with the client, we understand that these 3 things, or these 4 things, or these 9 things are going to be necessary for this type of event. So, PR, good, bad, and otherwise. But effectively managing relationships, right? And so I was in an event recently with media, and it was an important event to have media at. We were, in a sense, controlling the narrative in that event. And I'm speaking kind of, the people in charge of the event. There was not going to be a way to spin this event in a negative way, but we wanted to make sure that the media was there for certain speakers and had access to people for interviews, so that it was good. Professional relationships within the community, with outside the community, with government agencies, with all these different things that happen, it's important to maintain those relationships. When we talked about media relations, if you want to put out a press release and you're not a good writer, don't put out a press release. Find somebody who is. I have had the privilege of organizing, creating events, and doing kind of little short news releases, even to a selective audience. And over time, I've gotten better at them. I'm still not great at them, but those bullet points are very, very good. If I'm sending out an email to 100 people about an event, I want them to read it and get the gist of it and be done. I don't want to spend in the 5th paragraph of an email, oh, geez, finally we know what this is about, right? It's, A, B, C, D, E, done. From here to here, at this time, transportation provided, hotel rooms provided, blah, 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 blah. Read it, reread it, and I recommend this to all my students with papers. Have somebody else read it. Does this include everything that I think it does? Because you all know that you can look at something 50 times and think you've got everything, and someone, it'll probably make you mad at first. The lay person walks up and goes, "Where's this?" And you go, "Oh, I can't believe I forgot that." News releases, again, ASAP. How do they want to do it? And, follow up by phone. If it's an event that is new, and it's new to the area, and we want it to grow and get bigger and better, media coverage becomes key. Hey, it's the first time we're putting on this event. We'd love for you to come by and tell you a little bit about it, and you can take some, what we like to call B-roll footage of it for your segment. Even if it's 15 seconds on TV, that's 15 more seconds exposure than you didn't have prior to it. That can drum up some interest for the event of, hey, here's what's happening this weekend in your community that maybe you didn't know about. So again, follow through is always key with anything. You already know that. Media registration area, staff member assigned to the media so that it is, hey, my name is JB. I'm here to help you. Let me kind of show you guys where you can set up. And here you have access to this. You have access to that. If you have any questions, here's my phone number. Here's my card. Here's my pager number. Here's whatever it is. And again, anything that's going to happen that may change, and you've already heard me talk about this ad nauseum, something will, then let's update this. Hey, I'm really glad you guys are here, and I know we said that the speaker was coming at 11. There's been a problem with their flight. They won't be here till 11:45. So I just wanted to let you know, if your only reason to be here is to cover that person, you have 45 extra minutes. So plan accordingly. Or they're early and they have to leave because of the weather, so they're actually going to be here. Call, reach out. So you might want to come a little bit earlier because they've moved up their speaking engagement time 15 minutes. All those things that happen, which of course you would also communicate to the attendees as well. All the different things that you see there have been to some meetings where on this side separately they pull people aside for a quick podcast interview. Anything that you have, can be part of it for, and as an event person, hey, your hotel or your event site or your company's placing this event. Do you mind if we spend 5 minutes to talk to you about how this all came together, how you organized this, and, kind of what it's all about? Control that narrative and get it out to as many people as possible, and never assume, does anybody listen to podcasts? Does anybody go on YouTube? Does anybody use this social media outlet? If one person does, it's one more than you had before you took 5 minutes to do it, right? Spokespeople. Talked about image of the message, good communicator, combination of knowledge and character, depending on, as we said before, the outcome of the event, what you're trying to convey, speakers are important. And I'm not saying, look, in political situations, you may want political speakers. But in non-political situations, you don't. I went to a sports event, and we had a classic sportscaster who was very, very old, and I won't say his name. He was fantastic. I think he said some wildly inappropriate things for a younger audience. For his generation, I don't think anybody batted an eye about it. So it's like knowing your audience. And is it going to make them cringe or is it going to make them laugh? So, it's the thing. I mean, a revered personality. And I would say most people weren't offended, but we were just kind of like, oh, okay, that just came out of their mouth. It was very interesting. Pre-convention meetings, post-convention meetings, like we talked about, it's just as important to get it before as it is to get it after. We want to find out perceptions, changes that need to be made before it happens and after it happens. Communication, and then one more time, communication.